Time right now, 10:42. We are T-minus 5 minutes from launch out of Kazakhstan. And our weather producer extraordinaire, I call him James Brighton here, who also is our resident NASA enthusiast, spacey things, Carlene.
I've tried, but
Very
that does
good.
not fit on a business card, all those words.
It's too much. And so he's been practicing his Russian.
Yeah.
But all I have is Roscosmos Soyuz launching, right?
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's about as far as I'm going to get too, Jan.
That's all I've got.
So what we're watching here in the next couple of minutes with you on Live Impact News is the launch of NASA astronaut Anil Menon and 2 Roscosmos cosmonauts, because the International Space Station, which these individuals are bound for today, is exactly that, is an international science lab. So the Russian Space Agency, Roscosmos, and the United States Space Agency, NASA, they do these launches where they will transport each other's crews to the International Space Station. So what we're about to see today is 3 individuals, 1 American, 2 Russians, launching up to the International Space Station. If it was a launch happening under NASA's purview from American soil, you typically see maybe 2 or 3 Americans, a Russian, and then maybe an international partner. So today's launch is coming to us, as Jane mentioned, from Kazakhstan, where the Russian Federation leases this spaceport. We have about a little less than 4 minutes left. So let me give you a kind of an overview, Jane, of what we're expected to see today, because it's a little bit different than what we've seen in recent years when NASA does a launch with its partner SpaceX. We're still very much dealing with a government agency here in Russia that is doing today's launch. And the Soyuz, its heritage dates back to the 1960s. When you think back to the great space race between NASA and Russia, when we're talking about trying to get into Earth orbit for the first time, when we're talking about trying to get to the moon for the first time, and then eventually on to this joint partnership where these 2 countries, despite whatever political tensions may be happening in the world, continue to operate this International Space Station. So the spaceship that we're going to see today is this Soyuz rocket. What's interesting about it, again, is its heritage, its design. A lot of it dates back straight to the 1960s. But it's also going to get the crew to the International Space Station remarkably faster than SpaceX does today. Although the SpaceX Crew Dragon is a very high-tech, modern, sleek design from SpaceX with his partner there at NASA, today is more of a launch that is steeped both in tradition and some modern science, but it's going to actually get to the International Space Station in a mere 3 hours versus a SpaceX launch, which takes almost 24 hours to get up to the International Space Station. And so you're looking at some live pictures here. Again, we're in Kazakhstan. We're launching essentially from a barren desert area here. And also a biggest comparison between this and the SpaceX launches is when this crew returns, they're going to parachute back down into similar kind of flat, sandy terrain. NASA in recent years has transitioned back to splash landing in the ocean. So again, we have 2 very different spacecraft, different technologies. There are pros and cons to these different approaches, but because you have one space agency handling launches and then a second space agency handling launches from 2 different approaches, we have seen in recent years that does give us a bit of a redundancy if ever there was a problem. Roscosmos in recent years had a damaged launch pad that they needed to repair. We also, of course, had many years where NASA didn't have a way to get its own crews to the International Space Station after the retiring of the Space Shuttle in 2011. SpaceX didn't pick up launches until 2020, so we were fully reliant on the Russian Space Agency to get us into space. So we got about a minute left here, and you're going to see in the next minute or so that the ground propellant feed, the fuel, is fully inside this rocket. There's also a tradition that happened at about the T-minus 7 minute mark, Jane, where they actually physically still insert a key on the launch pad. This is a historic tradition that the Roscosmos Space Agency does to essentially initiate that automatic launch sequence before the ground crew leave the launch pad. So there is a physical ceremony that happens with a physical key, but they now, of course, have cleared off that launch pad so that the Soyuz transfers internal electrical power. Everything's kind of happening inside the spacecraft now. And when we get to T-minus 35 35 seconds, we're going to see the first umbilical tower retract. So we're going to start to see things get out of the way. You'll start to see then a couple more umbilicals retract. Yep, there it is. Perfect timing. And that tells us we're about 35 seconds away from launch. And at about T minus 15 seconds, that's when the engine sequence will start. The turbo pumps will begin powering the flight, and we'll get liftoff here at about 10:47 a.m. Eastern time. It is evening time there in Kazakhstan. So if our lovely producer Carlene give us a little audio, I think we're just seconds away from launch.
Second umbilical tower separates. Engine 10 pumps at flight speed.
Booster ignition now at full throttle and liftoff. Menon, Dubrov, and Kikina now on their way to the International Space Station as part of a 2-orbit journey.
All the system parameters are nominal.
We have a good roll, pitch, and yaw as we head downrange.
Engines of the first and second stage are functioning nominally.
We have confirmation that the first and second stage engines have good performance. We have good structural parameter performance, and the Soyuz is delivering 930,000 pounds of thrust from its 4 boosters and single engine. The first stage of the Soyuz measures 68 feet in length and 24 feet in diameter, burning liquid fuel for the first 2 minutes and 6 seconds of flight. We're now a minute into today's flight. Everything continuing to proceed as planned, and the velocity is currently 1,100 miles per hour.
70. The flight is nominal. 70. Flight nominal.
We're now a minute and 20 seconds into today's flight of the Soyuz MS-29 spacecraft on top that Soyuz 2.1A booster. We still have good first stage performance.
Ready to
90.
report the exact launch time. Reloads or
First and second stage engines stable.
17 hours, 47 minutes, 43
The pressure is 1511, 1429. Copy.
We're now 1 minute and 54 seconds into today's flight, so the escape tower has been jettisoned. And momentarily, the 4 strap-on boosters have been jettisoned, and these have completed their job and have dropped away at an altitude of 28 statute miles. The Soyuz is now traveling at about 3,350 miles an hour, and there you can see on your screen as those 4 strap-on boosters were jettisoned.
The pressure is nominal.
Again, everything continuing to proceed as planned. We are receiving good reports of the structural performance of the Soyuz as it continues its ride uphill. We are now just over 2.5 minutes into today's launch of the Soyuz MS-29 spacecraft, and that launch shroud has now been jettisoned, and the rocket's altitude is now about 48 miles high. And we're now seeing an external rocket camera view that the crew will switch in to replace the in-cabin view at that time of fairing separation.
stabilization nominal.
We're now 3 minutes into today's launch of the Soyuz spacecraft. Everything continuing to proceed as planned and receiving good reports from the blockhouse in Baikonur.
Vehicle parameters nominal.
The Soyuz is now traveling at a speed of about 4,700 miles per hour. The Soyuz core stage is performing as expected, and the core stage of the Soyuz is 56 feet in length, 13.5 feet in diameter, with a single engine with 4 fuel chambers providing between 178,000 and 220,000 pounds of thrust for its 3 minute and 28 seconds of operation.
210 seconds. Control system parameters nominal. Copy. On board.
We're about 3 minutes and 45 seconds into today's flight of the Soyuz as it continues its flight uphill. It is about an 8 minute and 50 second total ride to orbit before we have that third stage separation, and the Soyuz spacecraft will be on its way to chase the International Space Station.
Copy. The crew are feeling fine.
So, James, so far, so good then.
So far, so good. And I can kind of give you an explanation to why we're hearing so many layers of audio there, because we have the the NASA commentator who's coming in loud and clear. Then we have someone from the Russian Space Agency, cosmonaut agency there, Roscosmos, who is providing an English translation, English commentary to what the Russian Space Agency, which we can kind of also hear in the background, is saying back in Russian. So we're kind of getting a couple layers of what's happening. So again, coming up about 4 minutes here into launch, we're going to continue to see different core stages of the rocket come off. Each one of those stages, Jane, is essentially where they house all the fuel needed to get out of Earth's orbit. You need lots of fuel, obviously, to get up. But it is really impressive that this type of launch can get the crew into Earth's orbit within 8 minutes. And then by this afternoon, they're going to be docking at the International Space Station. So we can see here now that we're beginning to see another core stage shut down, and we're going to probably jettison off another section of those core stages. Yep, there you go. You can see it coming off there. We were also kind of saying while we were watching the launch that, you know, it's nice that we have this particular camera angle, which looks like it's looking down one of the solar panels. But one of the things we've kind of gotten spoiled with SpaceX is they've got cameras like everywhere, right? You can see the crew inside, you can see multiple angles. They got cameras on the booster rockets that come back down. You know, they've made it into a bit of a theatrical event, kind of in the age of YouTube. It seems like we have a little fewer camera angles right now, but we're able to still follow along. And again, we're about 5 minutes, coming up on 5 minutes since the launch. And so we're watching, again, more of those stages continuing to be jettisoned off.
So fast, 4,000 plus miles an hour in orbit. You said 8 minutes, and then to the space station in 3 hours. I don't get that much done in 3 hours.
Well, 3 hours, I'm like, I could go home to Charleston in 3 hours, or I could go to orbit.
By the time we're sitting here with Nick this afternoon, we'll be watching them dock at the International Space Station, which is crazy.
That is very impressive, pretty wild. And so they are heading up to the space station where just more scientific research will be conducted.
You know, I was just reflecting on this on the way in because I heard the NASA broadcast kind of saying, you know, the International Space Station allows us on Earth to learn about life in space so that in the future we can do longer missions to the moon and Mars, which is so true. But then I'm like, what does that mean exactly, right? Because we hear that with every one of these launches. And what that really means is they're learning to exercise the body. They're learning to stay healthy, right? If somebody gets sick or there's a medical episode. It also, we've got to grow food. So there is actually a plant lab on the International Space Station where they're trying to perfect growing food with, you know, different pH types of water or no water or spin gravity, because
potatoes,
yes. If you've seen The Martian, it is true, right? Because you know, we can ship food to the International Space Station. We could probably ship food to the moon, but if we ever do want to go to Mars one day, it's going to take a really long time to be shipping food out there. So they're going to have to grow food in a really harsh environment. And that's literally what they're practicing right now on the International Space Station.
Amazing. This is why space exploration and these missions don't get old. And when you see the rocket and it off the launch pad, it just went. I wish we could run that back because it was such a quick launch off the launch pad. It was very impressive, and it happened without a hitch, it seems. So far, so good again.
Yeah, the crew is nearly in orbit, so the third stage, providing that final push just to kind of achieve that orbital velocity. And then by the time we get to 9 minutes, which will bring us towards the top of the hour, that solar array right there that we saw on your screen, it will deploy out. It'll give them power for their flight to the International Space Station, which again is only like 3 hours long. They're going to get to the space agency sooner than you and I could probably fly to Los Angeles right now.
Yeah, or exactly. Or get out of, the Charlotte area and go to...
just wait through the traffic line.
Just get through traffic.
Yeah.
Exactly. That afternoon rush sometimes can be hours long. All right. So you said about 2 o'clock rendezvous and docking happening.
There are some automated systems that'll be in place that will help guide the spacecraft to the docking port on the International Space Station. They can manually maneuver it if they need to, but there's radar and things that'll help them kind of dock. Before the crew transfers into the International Space Station, you can be sure that they're going to check to make sure everything is tightly sealed. They do all the pressurizing to equal the atmosphere between those two areas. And then this afternoon, there will be a welcoming aboard ceremony on the International Space Station. You'll see crews kind of do a handoff. They'll actually do handoff of notes and experiments for the next couple of days before the crew from Russia returns back down, and this crew will then relieve them.
All right, very good. Love having James here as we do all the pre-launch stuff and get some inside, inside chit chat and
Tea.
inside baseball and inside space.
Spacey
Tea.
things.
Spacey things, as is going to be on his business card.
That fits.
One day. James, thanks for that. So 3 hours from now, the docking coverage will begin here on Live Impact News, because that's what we do, bringing these live feeds as they become available. And that will do it for this morning edition with Charlotte Today. Coming up next, Majestic Storm is in for Colleen, so enjoy that. And I'll see you back on WCNC Charlotte News for your local news headlines at 4. Have a great morning.